The Mining Guild of Titans Reach didn't believe in apologies. They believed in quarterly reports, profit margins, and the kind of efficiency that turned human error into footnotes. The boardroom floated 300 kilometers above the lunar surface, all chrome and glass, surrounded by the black velvet of space. 78 executives from 40 different species sat in ergonomic chairs worth more than most colonies' annual budgets. The chief operating officer, a krill with silver exoskeleton polished to mirror shine, tapped the table with one jointed claw. "Agenda item 7, she announced, her voice resonating through translation implants. "The Epsilon 9 incident, casualty report finalized. One human male, age 42, trapped in subsurface collapse. Recovery deemed economically non-viable." A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the room. 17 species nodded in unison. The krill continued without pause. "Compensation package approved at standard rate, 2,000 credits. Next of kin notified. Case closed." The holographic display flickered, showing a man's face for exactly 3 seconds. Dark hair graying at the temples, smile lines around his eyes. A name in small print, Marcus Webb, excavation specialist. Then, the image dissolved into spreadsheets and the meeting moved forward. Nobody noticed the door open. She was so quiet that the ventilation system made more noise. A woman, maybe 55, wearing a canvas jacket that had seen better decades. Her hair was pulled back in a simple braid, streaked with gray and black. She carried a worn leather satchel over one shoulder and a thermos in one hand. Behind her, the security guard stood frozen in the doorway, his face pale, his hand hovering near his sidearm, but not quite touching it. The krill looked up, irritation sharpening her compound eyes. "This is a private session. You'll need to—" "I know what I need," the woman said softly. Her voice carried, despite its quietness, the way certain sounds cut through chaos. "You buried my husband 3 weeks ago. I'm here to collect." Nervous laughter scattered through the room like dropped coins. A Vex delegate, gelatinous and translucent, rippled with what might have been amusement. "Madam, the compensation has been transferred. If there's been an error in processing—" "No error," she said, setting her thermos on the polished table. The sound of it meeting the surface seemed louder than it should have been. "You paid exactly what you thought he was worth. 2,000 credits for 30 years of digging your wealth out of rock." The chief operating officer's claws clicked against her tablet. "The contract was clear. All excavation personnel acknowledge inherent risks. Your husband signed the liability waiver." "He did," the woman agreed. She pulled out a chair, the kind that cost more than Marcus had made in 6 months, and sat down as if she'd been invited. "He also signed our marriage certificate. Funny thing about humans, we take both documents seriously." Security moved toward her, but the krill raised a claw. "Let her speak. We can spare 60 seconds for grief." The condescension in her tone was thicker than atmosphere. The woman smiled. It was the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the kind that makes predators nervous. "My name is Elena Webb. My friends call me Ellie. Marcus called me his compass because I always pointed him home." She paused, unscrewing her thermos with deliberate slowness. "The miners at Epsilon 9 had a different name for me." She poured coffee into the thermos cap. The steam rose in delicate spirals. "They called me the Wolf Keeper." The room went still. Not the comfortable silence of boredom, but the electric quiet before lightning strikes. A human representative 3 seats down shifted uncomfortably. He'd worked the outer colonies. He'd heard the stories. Elena took a sip, eyes closed as if savoring it. "You see, before Marcus and I settled down, I had a different career. Wildlife rehabilitation specialist. Worked with the military for a while, training rescue animals for deep space operations. Mostly canines, dogs, wolves, hybrid species designed for extreme environments." The krill's translator hummed. "Fascinating. Now, if you'll—" "I retired 15 years ago," Elena continued as if she hadn't been interrupted. "Moved to the colonies with Marcus, opened a small sanctuary for abandoned animals. People don't realize how many pets get left behind when mining families move between stations." She set down the cup. "But you never really stop training. It's like breathing. You just keep doing it." A Thendari executive, reptilian with eyes like copper coins, leaned forward. "Ms. Webb, we sympathize with your loss, but this is neither the time nor the venue for—" "You're right," she said quietly. This isn't the time for grief. That was 3 weeks ago when I stood in our quarters and read your message. One paragraph, 47 words including the legal disclaimers. Her voice remained level, almost gentle. Do you know what I did after reading it? No one answered. I made coffee, fed the animals, sat in Marcus's chair and thought about what he would want me to do. She reached into her satchel, pulling out a small photograph. It showed a man in mining gear, arm around her shoulders, both of them grinning in front of a sunset on some distant world. He was a patient man. Always said violence was the last refuge of small minds. She placed the photo face down on the table. But Marcus isn't here anymore, and I'm not as patient as he was. The chief operating officer stood, her exoskeleton gleaming. Security, please escort Ms. Webb. The lights went out. Emergency illumination kicked in after 3 seconds, bathing everything in crimson. The holographic displays flickered, died, and rebooted, showing nothing but static. Through the chaos of surprised voices and scrambling assistants, Elena sat perfectly still, coffee in hand. The Krill's voice sharpened. What is this? What have you done? Me? Elena's eyebrows raised in mock innocence. I'm just a widow having coffee. But my family. She glanced toward the door. They don't handle separation well. The security guard who'd been frozen in the doorway stumbled backward. His weapon clattered to the floor. Behind him, 3 shapes moved through the crimson light, low to the ground, silent except for the click of claws on polished flooring. Wolves. Not the ancient Earth variety that existed only in gene banks and historical records. These were something else. Larger, with fur that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their eyes glowed with a bioluminescent amber that had nothing to do with the emergency lights. The lead wolf, a massive male with a scar across his muzzle, padded into the boardroom with the confidence of something that had never known fear. Elena didn't turn around. The black one is Ghost. He's been with me since he was a pup. Found him on a derelict station, only survivor of a failed military experiment. He's very protective. Her voice remained conversational, as if discussing the weather. The gray female is Ash, smart one. She can open airlocks, bypass security protocols, and she holds grudges like you wouldn't believe. The third wolf, smaller but somehow more unsettling, moved along the wall. Its fur shifted colors, a camouflage adaptation that made it nearly invisible against the chrome surfaces. And that's Whisper, Elena said. Genetic modification gone right for once. She's shy around strangers, but when she wants to be found. The woman's smile returned, cold as vacuum. Well, you'll know. The chief operating officer's claws scraped against the table, a sound like nails on a chalkboard. This is illegal, bringing unauthorized bioweapons into... Bioweapons? Elena's laugh was short and bitter. They're registered service animals. I have all the documentation. Therapy wolves for PTSD. Very helpful after losing a spouse to corporate negligence. Ghost moved closer to the table, his amber eyes fixed on the Krill. A low growl rumbled from his chest, subsonic, felt more than heard. Several executives pushed back from the table. A vexed delegate rippled toward the exit, only to freeze when Ash positioned herself in front of the door. Elena took another sip of coffee. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit down, all of you, and you're going to listen to a story. It's about a man who spent 3 decades making you rich, who went into the dark every single day so you could sit in rooms like this and decide he was worth 2,000 credits. We followed protocol, the Krill insisted, but her voice wavered. The geological scan showed instability. We ordered evacuation. 12 minutes before the collapse, Elena interrupted. Your sensors detected the problem 12 minutes before the rock fell. Marcus's team was 4 kilometers deep. The emergency pods were 6 kilometers from their position. She leaned forward. You knew they couldn't make it, but you sounded the alarm anyway so the records would show you tried. Silence, heavy and damning. How do you know this? A human executive whispered. Elena reached into her satchel again, pulling out a data chip. Because Marcus wasn't just a digger, he was smart, observant, and he knew when something felt wrong. He'd been recording inconsistencies in the safety reports for months, geological data that didn't match reality, evacuation drills that got shorter every quarter, equipment maintenance deferred to save costs. She slid the chip across the table. It spun to a stop in front of the Krill. 6 hours before he died, Marcus transmitted everything to our home server, just in case. He had a feeling. Called it his insurance policy. Her voice softened. He always was better at seeing the future than I gave him credit for. The chief operating officer stared at the chip as if it might explode. What do you want? Money? We can negotiate a better settlement. I don't want your money. Then what? Elena stood slowly, Ghost immediately at her side. I want you to understand what you took from me. Not an asset, not a liability, not a line item in your quarterly report. She gestured to the wolves. These three, they're all I have left, my family, and they're very good at helping me solve problems. Whisper materialized beside the Krill's chair, her camouflage dropping to reveal teeth that seemed too white in the red light. You see, Elena continued, humans have this thing about fairness. We're not always good at it, but when we lose someone we love, we become very creative about balancing scales. She walked toward the window overlooking space. Marcus used to say the universe doesn't care about justice. That's why we have to care twice as hard. She turned back to face them. So here's my offer. You're going to release every safety report you've buried, every inspection you've falsified, every corner you've cut in the name of profit. You're going to do it publicly, and you're going to accept whatever consequences come from it. The Krill's exoskeleton rattled. That would destroy the company. Thousands would lose their jobs. Entire colonies depend on... Yes, Elena said simply. It would. Terrible, isn't it, when one decision impacts so many lives? She let that sink in. But I'm not unreasonable. I'll give you a choice. She whistled once, sharp and clear. All three wolves sat in perfect unison. Option 1. You do what I ask. The truth comes out. You face whatever justice the Galactic Trade Commission decides. Maybe you survive, maybe you don't, but at least you'll do it with some dignity intact. And option 2? The Krill asked, though her tone suggested she didn't want to know. Elena's smile vanished. Option 2, I leave. I take my family and go home. And over the next few months, terrible accidents start happening. Equipment failures, data breaches, supply chain disruptions. Nothing traceable, nothing provable, but consistent, persistent, like an infection that won't heal. She paused. My wolves are very patient, and I've got nothing but time. The boardroom erupted into chaos, voices overlapping in 17 languages, translation systems struggling to keep up. Some executives argued for calling station security. Others advocated immediate compliance. A few simply stared at the wolves with the resignation of prey that knows it's already caught. The chief operating officer raised her claws for silence. When the room finally quieted, she spoke with careful precision. You're asking us to commit corporate suicide based on the word of a grieving widow and some trained animals. No, Elena corrected. I'm giving you the chance to do the right thing before I do the necessary thing. There's a difference. She pulled out her tablet, tapping the screen once. I sent copies of Marcus's files to 3 investigative journalists, 5 labor unions, and the Galactic Workers Protection Agency. Timed release. They go public in 72 hours unless I send the cancellation code. The Krill's compound eyes flickered. You're bluffing, Elena shrugged. Am I? Feel free to wait and find out. But in my experience, bluffs work better when you're not sitting in a room with 3 apex predators. Ghost yawned, revealing teeth designed to crack pressure suit helmets. Call it motivation. A Thendari executive stood abruptly. This is extortion. We could have you arrested. For what? Elena's voice remained maddeningly calm. Bringing my registered service animals to a public building? Filing legitimate safety complaints? Scheduling the release of truthful information? She tilted her head. Please, call security. I'd love to explain to station authorities why the Mining Guild is so eager to suppress workplace safety data. The human representative who'd shifted earlier cleared his throat. Ms. Webb, I worked Epsilon 9 before transferring to corporate. I knew Marcus. His voice was quiet, respectful. He was a good man. But even if everything you're saying is true, destroying the guild won't bring him back. No, Elena agreed. Nothing will. But it might save the next Marcus. The next husband who kisses his wife goodbye and doesn't come home because someone decided his life was worth less than quarterly projections. She walked back to her chair, sitting down again. The wolves repositioned themselves, forming a loose triangle around her. I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm trying to fix you. If the guild can't operate safely, it shouldn't operate at all. And if admitting your failures ends you, she took another sip of coffee, then you were already broken. The krill was silent for a long moment. Around her, the board members exchanged glances, weighted with calculation. Finally, she spoke. If we agree to your terms, how do we know you'll stop? That this isn't just the beginning of endless demands? Elena pulled out her tablet again, showing the screen. This is the cancellation code. The moment you make the announcement, I send it. Everything stops. The files get sealed in an encrypted archive with instructions to release only if something happens to me. She met the krill's eyes. I'm not interested in revenge for its own sake. I'm interested in accountability. Give me that, and you'll never see me again. And if we refuse? The krill's voice was barely above a whisper. Elena glanced at Ghost, who tilted his head as if listening to a question only he could hear. Then I become a different kind of widow, the kind who spends her grief productively. She stood once more, collecting her thermos. I've already lost everything that mattered. You still have something to lose. Think about which one of us has more to fear. She walked toward the door. Ash moved aside, allowing passage. Elena paused at the threshold, looking back one last time. You have 60 hours now. I spent 12 minutes making coffee and talking. The clock runs whether you're deciding or not. Wait, the human representative called out. What happens to the wolves? If we agree, what do you do with them? Elena's expression softened for the first time since entering. We go home, to the sanctuary. There are 37 other animals waiting for dinner. Rescues, strays, creatures nobody else wanted. She scratched Ghost behind his ear, the gesture achingly domestic against the backdrop of corporate terror. We'll feed them, brush their fur, maybe sit outside and watch the stars. Normal things, quiet things. That's it? The krill sounded almost offended. You threaten corporate collapse and then return to feeding pets? That's it, Elena confirmed. See, you still don't understand. I don't want power or money or revenge. I just want to live in a universe where companies value people as much as they value profit, where a man like Marcus can go to work without his wife, wondering if he'll come home. She smiled sadly. It's a small dream, but apparently it requires all this. She left without another word, the wolves flowing after her like shadows. The door closed with a soft hiss, and the emergency lights flickered back to normal illumination. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then the krill spoke into the silence. Motion to vote on compliance with Webb's demands. Seconded, the human representative said immediately. Discussion. The krill looked around the table. No one met her eyes. Then we vote. All in favor of full disclosure and public acknowledgement of safety violations? Slowly, reluctantly, hands and claws and appendages rose. Not all of them, but enough. The krill sagged in her chair, suddenly looking ancient despite her species' longevity. Motion passes. Legal department will prepare the statement. She turned to the human representative. You knew her husband. Was he really the kind of man who'd want this? The representative considered the question. Marcus? No. He'd have forgiven you, moved on, found another job. He paused. But he's not here to make that choice. She is. And you know what? I think she's right. Sometimes the kindest thing a person can do is refuse to let cruelty go unanswered. Across the station, Elena Webb walked through corridors that bustled with shift changes and commerce. Ghost, Ash, and Whisper drew stares, but no one interfered. Service animal credentials opened most doors, and her calm demeanor suggested she belonged wherever she walked. She found a quiet observation deck, empty except for maintenance drones. The view showed Titan's reach in all its cratered glory, the lunar surface scarred by centuries of mining. Somewhere down there, 4 kilometers deep in collapsed rock, Marcus's body would remain. The guild hadn't even tried to recover it. Too expensive, they'd said. Too dangerous. Elena pressed her hand against the cool glass. I hope I did right, she whispered. You always were the reasonable one. Ghost leaned against her leg, solid and warm. Ash sat on her other side. Whisper phased in and out of visibility, nervous energy made manifest. Her tablet pinged, a message from the Guild's legal department, official statement scheduled for public release in 4 hours, full disclosure of safety violations across all facilities, independent investigation requested, CEO stepping down pending review. Elena read it twice, then sent the cancellation code. Somewhere in the digital ether, encrypted files sealed themselves away. Insurance, but hopefully unnecessary now. "Come on," she told the wolves. "Let's go home." The transport back to her sanctuary took 3 hours. She spent them in silence, watching stars slip past the viewport. Ghost slept with his head on her lap. Ash systematically inspected every corner of the shuttle. Whisper alternated between visible and invisible, playing some game only she understood. When they finally docked at the small station that housed her sanctuary, the airlock opened to chaos. Barking, howling, chirping, and sounds that defied easy categorization. 37 animals in various states of rehabilitation, each one abandoned or injured, or simply unwanted. A young volunteer, couldn't be more than 19, rushed over. "Ms. Webb, thank God, the Carillion lizard got into the ventilation again, and I think the space ferrets are plotting something. Also, we're low on food for the—" He stopped, noticing her expression. "Are you okay?" Elena set down her bag, immediately swarmed by creatures seeking attention. A 3-legged dog, a cat with cybernetic eyes, something that looked like a cross between a rabbit and a squid. She knelt, letting them press against her, their warmth and need anchoring her to something real. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I think I am." The days that followed were deliberately ordinary. Feeding schedules, medical checks, training sessions. She taught a traumatized parrot to trust again. Helped a blind wolf pup navigate by sound, cleaned cages and repaired equipment, and did all the small, necessary tasks that keep a sanctuary running. The news networks exploded with the mining guild scandal, investigations launched, executives arrested, safety regulations overhauled across the entire sector. Marcus's name appeared in reports, identified as the whistleblower whose final act had been sending evidence to his wife. Elena didn't watch the broadcasts. She already knew how the story ended. 3 weeks after the board meeting, she received a visitor. The human representative from the guild, still wearing his corporate uniform but looking somehow smaller in it. He stood at the sanctuary entrance, hands clasped nervously. "Ms. Webb, I hope I'm not intruding." She was brushing Ash's fur, working through tangles with patient strokes. "Depends on why you're here." "To apologize," he said simply, "and to thank you. What you did, it probably saved lives, including mine. I've been ignoring the safety violations for years, telling myself it wasn't my problem." He looked at the animals surrounding her. "I was wrong." Elena continued brushing. "What's your name?" "David. David Chen." "Well, David Chen, apologies are nice, but what are you going to do differently?" He pulled out a tablet. "I quit the guild, started a workers' rights advocacy group. We're pushing for mandatory safety audits across all mining operations. It's not much, but it's something," Elena finished. "That's all anyone can do, something." She set down the brush, finally looking at him directly. "Marcus would have liked you. He believed people could change if they had a reason to." "What was your reason?" David asked quietly. "For stopping after one move. You had them terrified. You could have demanded anything." Elena smiled faintly. "Because I'm not trying to be a villain. I'm trying to be a widow who loved her husband enough to make his death mean something." She gestured to the animals. "And because they need me. Anger is exhausting. Care is renewable." David nodded slowly. "The wolves, are they really therapy animals or—" "Both," she admitted. "They're trained for protection and companionship, military-grade genetics with rehabilitation protocols." Ghost looked up at the mention, eyes glowing softly. "But mostly they're family. Everything I have left of the life Marcus and I built." "I won't take more of your time," David said, turning to leave. He paused at the door. "For what it's worth, the miners are naming the new safety protocols after him, the Webb standards. It's going into law across 4 sectors." Elena's throat tightened. She managed a nod. He'd pretend to be embarrassed, then he'd make sure everyone followed them. After David left, she sat in Marcus's old chair, the one that still smelled faintly of him. Mineral dust and coffee and the soap he'd favored. Ghost laid his head on her knee. Ash curled at her feet. Whisper materialized on the chair's arm, finally still. Did I do good? She asked them, asked the empty air, asked the ghost of a man who'd promised to always come home. The wolves didn't answer with words, but they stayed close, and in the silence of the sanctuary, surrounded by creatures nobody else wanted, Elena Webb felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Not peace, not yet, but the possibility of it. Outside, the stars burned cold and indifferent. The mining guild restructured under new management. Safety inspectors descended on facilities across the sector. Lives were saved that would have been lost. Numbers in spreadsheets slowly transformed back into names, faces, futures, and in one small sanctuary on a forgotten station, a widow fed her wolves and tended to broken things and proved that sometimes the quietest voices carry the sharpest teeth. The universe didn't care about justice, but Elena Webb cared enough for both of them. Months passed. The scandal faded from headlines, replaced by newer crises and fresher outrages. The mining guild paid enormous fines, restructured completely, and eventually returned to operation under strict oversight. Several executives faced criminal charges. Others simply disappeared into comfortable retirements, golden parachutes softening their falls. Elena didn't follow the trials. She had animals to feed. The sanctuary grew. Word spread through the outer colonies about the woman who took in creatures nobody else wanted. Donations arrived, small but steady. Volunteers appeared, drawn by stories of the wolf keeper and her impossible family. She trained them carefully, teaching them how to handle traumatized animals with patience and respect, how to read body language across species barriers, how to know when to push and when to give space. Ghost became a therapy animal in truth, visiting mining facilities to help workers process trauma. His presence, massive and calm, seemed to give people permission to acknowledge their fear. Ash worked with security teams, demonstrating how enhanced canines could supplement safety protocols without replacing human judgment. Whisper remained shy, preferring the sanctuary's quiet corners, but even she warmed to certain visitors. One day, a transport arrived carrying a man in a wheelchair. Mining accident, the manifest said. Spinal damage, permanent. He was young, maybe 30, with haunted eyes and hands that trembled when he tried to pet the three-legged dog. I worked Epsilon 9, he told Elena. I was in the escape pod when he couldn't finish. When Marcus didn't make it, Elena said gently. The man nodded, tears streaming. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. We tried to wait, but the foreman said we had to go, that the timers were absolute, and Elena knelt beside his wheelchair. You survived. That's what Marcus would have wanted. Every single one of you who made it out, that's what he would have wanted. But he didn't, the man whispered. He didn't make it, and I did, and I can't. Ghost padded over, laying his massive head in the man's lap. The weight of it, the warmth, the steadiness. The man's hands sank into dark fur, and his breathing slowly evened. Marcus kept a journal, Elena said after a while. Did you know that? Recorded messages for me just in case. I couldn't listen to them for weeks after he died. Too raw, too soon. She sat on the floor, eye level with the man. But when I finally did, you know what he talked about? The crew. How proud he was of the team. How he'd been training the newer guys, making sure they knew the safety protocols. She reached up, gently taking the man's hand. He talked about you specifically. Said you were brilliant with the geological scanners, that you'd probably end up running your own crew someday. He was rooting for you. The man sobbed openly now, months of survivor's guilt pouring out. Ghost remained still, patient, absorbing the grief like stone absorbs rain. So here's what you're going to do, Elena continued. You're going to heal. You're going to learn to live with what happened. And when you're ready, you're going to use that brilliant mind to make sure it never happens to anyone else. That's how you honor him. Not by drowning in guilt, but by making his death matter. The man stayed at the sanctuary for 3 weeks. By the time he left, he was smiling again. Not the carefree smile of someone who'd never known loss, but the harder-won smile of someone who'd chosen to keep living anyway. Elena watched his transport depart, Ghost beside her. You're good at this, David Chen said. He'd become a regular visitor, his advocacy group now working directly with sanctuary volunteers. At helping people heal. I had a good teacher, Elena replied. Marcus always said that pain shared is pain divided, joy shared is joy multiplied. She looked at David. How's the advocacy work? Exhausting, rewarding, frustrating. He smiled. Worth it. We got new legislation passed in 3 more sectors. The Webb standards are becoming universal protocol. He'd be insufferable about that, Elena said, but her eyes were warm. Absolutely unbearable. Would probably give safety lectures at dinner parties. They stood in comfortable silence, watching ships come and go from the station, a whole galaxy in motion, countless lives intersecting and diverging like currents in an ocean. Can I ask you something? David said finally. Do you regret it? The way you handled the guild? Elena considered the question. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that people like Marcus die because profit matters more than safety. I regret that I had to become someone scary to make anyone listen. She paused. But do I regret doing it? No. Sometimes being kind means being hard first. And now? Now I'm just a woman with too many animals and not enough hours in the day. She smiled. It's enough. But that night, alone in her quarters, Elena pulled up the last recording Marcus had made. The one labeled, "If you're watching this, something went wrong." His face filled the screen, tired from a double shift but smiling anyway. Hey, Compass, if you're seeing this, then I guess The Rock finally won. Don't be sad. Okay, be sad for a little while, but then move on. You're too good at helping things to waste time on grief. He leaned closer to the camera. I know you, Ellie. You're probably thinking about doing something dramatic, some grand gesture to balance the scales. And maybe you should. Maybe the guild needs someone to scare them straight. But after that, after you've done whatever you need to do, I need you to promise me something. Elena's hand trembled, but she didn't pause the recording. Promise me you'll keep the sanctuary going. Keep saving the strays and the broken things. That's your real gift, not the training, not the tactical stuff from your military days. It's the way you see value in creatures everyone else gave up on. The galaxy needs that more than it needs another soldier. He smiled, the expression so familiar it hurt. I love you. I loved our life. And if I don't make it back, know that every day with you was worth whatever comes next. You made me better. Keep doing that for others. The recording ended. Elena sat in darkness, tears falling silently. I kept my promise, she whispered to the empty room. Both of them. Years passed. The sanctuary became an institution, a training ground for animal-assisted therapy across the sector. Elena wrote protocols, trained specialists, consulted on safety programs. Ghost, Ash, and Whisper became famous in their own right, appearing in educational materials about human-animal bonds. But fame didn't interest Elena. She remained exactly what she had always been, a woman who fed her wolves, tended to broken things, and occasionally reminded the powerful that some lines shouldn't be crossed. The mining guild never forgot. Every new executive received a briefing about the wolf keeper, and the day 3 animals brought a corporation to its knees. Safety violations dropped to near zero. The Webb standards became industry gospel. And somewhere in the cold math of prevented accidents, in the miners who went home to their families instead of being buried in rock, Marcus Webb's death meant something more than a line in a casualty report. Elena understood that rage had its place, that sometimes the only way to fix a broken system was to break it further, to crack it open and show everyone what festered inside. She'd been willing to be the villain for that. But she also understood that rage was finite. It burned hot and fast and consumed everything in its path, including the person wielding it. What sustained her in the years after Marcus's death wasn't anger. It was purpose. Every animal saved, every volunteer trained, every person who walked into the sanctuary carrying trauma and walked out carrying hope instead. That was the real revenge against a universe that tried to reduce human life to economic calculations. She made caring more valuable than profit, made compassion louder than quarterly reports, made 3 wolves and 1 grieving widow more powerful than an entire corporate empire. And she did it not by destroying, but by building something worth more than what was taken. On the 10th anniversary of Marcus's death, Elena stood at the observation deck where she'd first read the guild's message. The same view, the same stars, but she was different, weathered and tired and carrying more scars than she'd had before. Ghost was gone now, passed peacefully in his sleep at the impressive age of 17. His ashes were scattered on the sanctuary's grounds, mixed with the soil that fed the garden. Ash had slowed with age, but still supervised volunteers with stern authority. Whisper, impossibly, was still phasing in and out, though she spent more time visible these days. The sanctuary housed over 200 animals now. The operation had expanded to 3 stations, former mining facilities, repurposed and transformed into havens for the unwanted. Elena sipped her coffee, the same cheap instant brand Marcus had loved, and watched Titan's reach slowly rotate below. "We did okay," she said to his memory, to the stars, to the vast indifferent universe that somehow still held space for love and loss and the stubborn refusal to let either have the final word. Behind her, Whisper materialized, older and slower, but still impossibly loyal. The wolf leaned against her leg, warm and solid and real. "Yeah," Elena murmured, scratching behind Whisper's ears. "We did okay." The galaxy turned. Ships came and went. Life persisted in all its messy, complicated, beautiful persistence. And in a sanctuary built on grief and transformed into grace, the widow who'd once threatened corporate empires fed her wolves, tended her animals, and proved that sometimes the greatest revenge is simply refusing to let cruelty make you cruel. The universe didn't care about justice, but Elena Webb had cared enough to make justice anyway. And in the end, that was enough.